Yes, very excited here on Cyrus says. I'm always very excited, but those are reasons, hormonal balance reasons, which I won't get into. But today I've got a great guest, really good one, big name, big fish. But before I get into him, I just want to tell you what's happened to me. I just tried on female clothing and a female wig for some project. This is you get paid to do this. This is not done out of choice. And I have to tell you, I've come to the conclusion that anybody who wants to understand women better, and I mean men generally, should dress up as a woman properly. This is like a proper professional dress up, not like one of those silly college plays where you just wear a wig and go on stage. I've done everything. Okay, it took them about 2 hours to put it all together, and it was very painful, including a little bit of waxing here and there. And on top of that, that wig with the chotlis and everything else, and the stuff inside. Although I'm well endowed in the chest area, still they had to do a little bit there, and just putting on all the different things that go into being a woman. It took a hell of a long time and a lot of respect. So I'm saying every man once a year must dress up properly as a woman to understand what it takes to be a woman every day. You will appreciate it, and you will thank God that you were born the other gender. Having said that, one of the greats of our gender, living legend, and someone who I've drunk once or twice with, so I can almost call him a friend, the one and only Kabir Bedi is joining us. Kabir,
Hi,
automatically and magically,
Cyrus.
there you go. Wow.
How lovely to be talking to you and seeing you in this new avatar of yours as a podcaster as well. You know, I'm such a huge fan of the show that you and Kunal do on television.
Oh, this
It's
is
just, it's a world-class show. It's a world-class show.
Oops, this has gone the wrong way. I was going to praise you for 15 minutes. I had my whole speech ready. You caught me on the back foot with I don't know what to say. I have to defend myself. I wish you'd be more sarcastic instead. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
maybe you are, because you
you
got
deal
that.
with sarcasm, so it's hard to deal with real praise. But let me say, you know, I think your the week that wasn't is really a world-class show, and I salute you guys for what you do.
Wow. Thanks a lot, Kabir. That it takes a grown man and a very powerful and brave human being to say that. Thank you. Thank you. We are hoping to be on the Pegasus list as soon as possible. We can't wait, crossing our fingers. That'll give us that position that we've come, somewhere in our life. But let me quickly introduce yourself. I have a young producer called Silvery. Well, his real name is Antariksh, and he's a upcoming comedian himself, and he produces the show. But he's like 28 years old, and of course he knows who you are. But I had to explain to him that your voice is one of the great voices that India, the world has ever heard. Because growing up, Kabir Bedi's voice is something that if you heard it, you had to know it's him. I can only think of
Wow.
the other famous actor from the same period, Amitabh Bachchan, as the two big voices growing up, which are so distinctly different from anybody else's, and the most masculine sound that I've heard in the business. So I wanted him to just hear you, and you came on just off camera, offline, and you sort of spoke for a couple of seconds, and I think he understood what I meant. And I think
Yeah.
that talent nobody talks about.
Yeah, it's a gift I was blessed with, and I've sort of developed it over the years, and that's why I'm
Yeah.
blessed that people call me for commercials, documentaries, Sonny Lumiere's, all kinds of things. My voice has certainly helped me. Strangely, I wasn't that aware of it and didn't use it that earlier in my career. But as I got into my career, I realized, wait a minute, I have a great voice. I should use it more effectively and more powerfully. And I set out to do that. So it certainly helped me a lot in my career. I thank the Lord. I thank my parents. I thank all those who blessed me with this gift, because it has sure come in handy.
No, for me, I think God is really the ultimate comedian. You hear people like, say, a Sachin Tendulkar or a Mike Tyson, two of the great sportsmen of their generation, etc., with very light voices, which don't match the macho image of those characters on the field or in the boxing ring. And not to say that yours is the opposite, of course not. But I'm just saying it's almost like a forgotten art. The human voice, and especially this baritone, this male sort of burr that very few people seem to have anymore. And just to remind
Yeah.
people that it's still there, because I can't think of any modern day actor in Hindi cinema, and I can't even think actually off the top of my head in Hollywood either, with a really deep, sonorous sort of, which just gets you with one word, Kabir.
Now, the actors with good voices, and they use it too. I can just say I'm very grateful for mine.
Yeah, all right. I won't push this any further. But I'll just say this one
It's
thing.
it's one of those things, yeah. If you say, yeah, I got a great voice, man, I'm the best in the country, people say, arrogant fellow, arrogant
Like,
sucker,
come on,
arrogant
Kabir,
so
you've
and
got
so.
you've got this deep
You
voice.
know,
Everybody,
so
you
I
can't deny it.
appreciate it, I thank it, I revel in it, I love it, but I'm not going to go over the top and fall into the
I'll tell you
arrogance trap.
why I'm going there. It's like how they say that some people get all the genetic gifts. I mean, you're a great looking man, great voice, good physique, acting talent, chops, right place, right time. Maybe also in terms of career, we'll go into all that in a second. So it's almost like everything was given to you. As against somebody else, I won't take names. There are some actors who are horrible to look at and really should be on radio, and then they have terrible voices on top of that, and some of them have scanty talent as well. So I mean, just looking at it from that point of view, it's like you got the basket. You got everything put together.
Well,
Okay, don't obviously don't answer
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
horrible
It's one
thing
of
to
those,
answer.
I guess, again, one of those trick questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
If I
yeah.
say, yeah,
No,
I'm the best, it's you're arrogant. If you say no, then
I
you're
was just trying
lying.
to make a point with young Silvery because his
Mm,
generation perhaps has not enjoyed as much Kabir Bedi as mine has. So I was trying to
right.
explain to him that first and foremost it's his voice, which is something which which just stands out. Then we'll go into the
Yeah.
body of work, which is immense and huge. You should have got all the where's the government? Let's call them right now. Have you got the Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan? Have you been
No, I
given
have not.
things? Why haven't you
No.
got things? Your body of
I've
work
been,
is like
listen, Cyrus, I've been knighted by the Italian Republic. I am a Cavaliere,
so
which
you.
is the highest civilian honor a country can give anybody. So
That's true.
if they give me honors here, I'll gladly accept
So
them, but it's not
so
something that
you
I'm
to open this one up.
deprived of honors. I've had won enough awards in my life
You're saying if the
not to
Italians run
feel
our country,
deprived.
so if the Italians run our country, then you'll get the honors immediately. So in a sense, if okay, I'm putting it
Fortunately,
all together here.
fortunately, that's not likely to happen. So I'll wait for my turn.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's quickly introduce the stuff that you've done before we go into the book extensively. I mean, I don't even know where to start. Let's look at the really big one, Sandokan, which is iconic and made you a huge star in Italy and Europe. How did you pick up Italian, by the way, for all that? I mean, you didn't know the language, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't. In fact, I learned it on the go. And actually, the way it worked out, the Sandokan series that made me this mega star in Europe. Um, I was acting in Bollywood at the time, and the Italians came into town, and we had a meeting, and one thing led to another, and they asked me to fly to Italy at my own expense to do an audition. But
Wow.
I saw the opportunity, and I didn't make a fuss of it. I didn't think I'm an established actor. How dare they? I went, and I nailed the role, and the rest is history. Strangely enough, because it was a co-production between Italy, Germany, and France, uh, the one language the three European countries can agree on was English. So actually, that series was shot in English and then dubbed into Italian, French, German, Spanish, whatever languages across Europe. So I lucked out on the first one, but after that, I had to learn how to act in Italian as well. And of course, I did it because the Italians have been so good to me.
Piacere, grazie per avermi invitato. I'm trying to remember some lines from
Grazie.
a play. I don't know if that made any sense. from your
Thank you for having
chuckle.
invited me, you just said. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There you go. Not bad. Maybe I'll get to Sandokan's junior or some Sandokan retired on a beach.
I'll
Fat
bear that in mind.
Sandokan.
I'll bear that in mind. There could be the next Sandokan, Hello.
You don't know.
Uh,
You play Sandokan. I'll play the avatar of him when he's something else. He's really old or really, something's happened to him. He's been caught with an offshore account, and I'm putting it back into Indian context because that's what's happening
but
right now.
interesting you mentioned this because actually, after over 35 years, they've decided to remake the Sandokan series with a new actor, new technology, etc., which thrills me greatly because I've always said Sandokan deserved the latest technology. And finally, they're doing it. Because this series has remained in the minds of every Italian. I'm a household word in Italy. Grandmothers to grandchildren know me. And this is the kind of adulation I get. So they realized that it was time for a new Sandokan to come. Just keep, like the Marvel comics do, keep making new avatars of the old shows,
But
then remaking Sandokan. And with a Turkish actor called Can Yaman.
but then they'd get you back as in a
No, no,
special
no.
guest appearance, like they
No, no,
do
no.
in
No.
many of the others. Django, for example, with Jamie Foxx had Franco Nero coming back.
Yeah.
The original guy. I love those. Robert Mitchum in Cape Fear, if I remember correctly, when Robert De Niro plays it, he comes
Mhm.
in. He played the original bad guy in Cape Fear, the first version of it. God, no, we
Right.
must insist, Kabir. But let's quickly talk about so many.
Write to them,
There's
tell them.
there's bold and the beautiful. Well, we'll have to wait for some changes in charge here. we're working on different things. It's not easy, We're doing our bit. Bold and the Beautiful, which was apparently the biggest ever, soap opera. Again, I remember running throughout my school and college career. You were on that. You're not even mentioning the Hindi films you've done, which is, there are so many of them. You've continued working in.
Bo-
Yeah, sorry.
Bold and Beautiful, to be correct, was the second most watched television show ever, after Baywatch, and you know why that was. Uh, but really,
Your
it
voice
was
would have been
shown
wasted
in
in Baywatch.
104. It's in 143 countries, a billion people, audience of a billion people, and I was there for over a year, so almost a year. So Bold and Beautiful certainly was a very, very important in getting me a worldwide fan base,
You know,
and one of my big shows in America.
it's an awkward thing to ask you, so I'm not going to ask you to even answer this. But I think that you were celebrated more abroad than you were celebrated in India, in spite of the fact that you have a huge body of work in India as well. Now, I don't know whether that's a coincidence or
No,
it's a,
it's not
it's a
coincidence. It's not coincidence. It's a fact because, firstly, I wasn't here for about 30 years. I spent 30 years, my prime years abroad, in America, in England, in Italy. So I couldn't really do that many films in that time because I was abroad. In the middle of it all, I was called back to do Khoon Bhari Mang, which is my biggest Bollywood hit. But my career basically has been abroad, so there's no surprise that people know me for those things more than my Bollywood films. And that's one of the reasons I wrote my book. People should understand what career I have, why, what successes I've had, and also what huge setbacks I've had, and what a amazingly adventurous journey that I've had through these three continents and three film industries, from Bollywood to Hollywood and Europe. That's part of my journey, and that's why one of the reasons I wrote the book, because it's important for people to know what happened, and not just happened in terms of events and achievements and awards, but also the emotional setbacks, the emotional journey of an actor. What does it feel like to be an actor in these situations? How do you deal with success? How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with obstacles? All that's the reasons that I wrote this book.
Okay, Kabir, now that we mentioned the book, you've segued into it. Let's go, because that's why we're here more than anything else. Let's talk a little bit about the book. Tell us, why you decided to write the book exactly. Is that that point in your life where you want to recount what happened, or did somebody say, "Come on, Kabir, let's hear the whole story"? Because I remember whenever we've had you in a corner and we had a few drinks in our hands, I've always tried to ask you all kinds of ridiculous questions about your career, and you've always been nice enough to answer them, as long as I, brought the required drink for you in time every single time.
Right, right.
So is it that a lot of people want to know, Kabir, tell us what happened here, what happened there? So you get a lot of that, and you say, I put my story together, and maybe it'll interest a lot of people.
No, I had that from a lot of people. I had publishers along the way asking me to write my autobiographies, and I always said, I will, but I don't want deadlines, I don't want advances, I don't feel obligated. And I thought about it for the last 20 years. About 10 years ago, I started seriously thinking about it, made various notes and attempts, failed. Failed because I wrote 40, 50 pages, and I said, this book is boring me. My own book is boring me. I know I've got a great story. Why can't I tell it in an interesting way? What way would make it interesting, entertaining, involving, unputdownable? Those
Sex!
are the kind of that too. That too.
Every 9 pages, just put in a
There-
real
there's no
story.
there's no shortage of that in my life. But there's the question on a style and the way of structuring the book. And finally, I got that. And once I was clear on that, I sat down and I wrote it in a fevered passion, because I did want to tell it, for myself, for my family, for my friends. In fact, many friends have come to me after I wrote this book and said, Kabir, we've known you for 10, 15, 20 years. We never knew so many things about you. That's what I wanted. I wanted people to know things about, because nobody's seen all my films. People in Bollywood have seen my Bollywood films. People in Europe have seen my European films. Americans seen my American films. Some things went global, like the Bond film or Bold and Beautiful, that sort of seen globally. Nobody's seen the whole body of my work. So it's important, whether they can see it or not, to tell what I did and to share that, and also to share what it is to be a stranger in a strange land, to be an Indian actor in foreign countries, making his way through the uncharted forest of the film industry in each country. And that's all part of my story.
So here's the big question then: when you have your famous personality like yourself, does one, when you write this, does one keep it as politically correct as possible? I can't believe you would, because you've always just done your thing on your own terms. Um, but the tendency to do that is also there, because the fun, as you mentioned, is going to be if you're going to tell us the stories, as your friend said, "Oh, I didn't know this happened. I can't believe this thing that I read about you after knowing you for 40 years." So have you really, opened up and I
Yeah.
just don't mean the obviously the sexcapades and the ladies and all that, but more than that, issues with other people, fights on a set, dealing with strange people, being in awkward situations. Is all that in the book?
I have talked very openly and in great depth about the relationships that people knew me for, and that people have a legitimate interest in knowing. And I have done that in a very emotional way, a very detailed way. I've said things that people would normally keep hidden, so there's lots to discover in that. And and I feel I've written it in a way where I actually take them on the emotional journey through those relationships, um, with highly cinematic scenes. It's almost you are as though you're watching this relationship unfold before your eyes. And that was a challenge I set myself, to tell the truth as I saw it, to tell my truth, because books have been written about other people, but nobody told my story. And I didn't really put any filters on those relationships. I told them like they were. And I think there's a beauty to it, a poignancy to it. There's no malice. There's no desire to needlessly run anybody down. But there's equally a need to speak of things as they happened, really, truly, honestly, frankly.
Well, let's look at it this way: you and me are the two sex symbols of the country,
Of
and
course.
if there's anyone who's going to advise the young men on how to deal with the ladies, especially if they taste a little success, it's you and me.
Quite right.
So, and
Well,
let's
you
face it, I
certainly.
mean, I've never seen you without a lady. I remember meeting you in England when I was working with your niece in MTV. I've seen you at parties when one you just stared at you because we were at the wrong party at the wrong time, sort of situation. I've seen you, all over. I've seen you in more than three countries, frankly speaking, and you've never had, as you mentioned, a shortage of ladies. So, how many stories are there, and will that interest a voyeur like myself?
Boy like yourself who is seriously interested, um, because the relationships I have talked about are the relationships people need to know about. And you will certainly get a far more in depth understanding of me, of the women involved, of what that relationship was, in great depth and great emotional depth. So, yes, as a voyeur, you'd be very interested, but not in a prurient way, not in a cheap way, not in an exploitative way, but in a deeply human way as to what is the human story in this relationship, what really happened between two human beings who were deeply in love, went through various turbulences, who then had to part for whatever reasons which are stated in the book, and what happened afterwards. Those are things that, when I call my book Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor, it's because I have many stories to tell. It's not just about, there's two chapters on two very important women in my life, Prathama and Purvi. There are seven other chapters, which also talks about, like the story of my parents. I mean, these are people that were not only freedom fighters but had personally knew and related to Nehru and Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose, and had encounters with Tagore, who lived in huts while fighting for the freedom of the country, who then moved on to becoming major spiritual figures. I mean, my mother became the highest ranked Tibetan Buddhist nun in the world. So these are stories of extraordinary people going through extraordinary transitions themselves, living through extraordinary times like the freedom struggle, and then dealing with what happened after the freedom struggle. But more importantly, what it was like for me as a child to grow up with such parents, what influence they had on me. There was Sikhism from my father's side because he's a descendant of Guru Nanak. There's Buddhism from my mother's side. There's my own spiritual inquiry into the great religions, and hearing Jiddu Krishnamurti, hearing Osho, the lessons I learned from great modern day thinkers and gurus, and the conclusions that I've come to. There's a whole chapter on my beliefs as well. That's a separate chapter. So this is a book that involves many dimensions. It's not just about the few relationships that I've had. It's about my life. It's about all I went through as a human being, going through the business of acting, going through the enormous joys and traumas of relationships that I loved and lost. It's going through, it's about recovering from great financial reverses and re-rising to the point where I was knighted by the Italian Republic. All those things are sort of part of my story. It has many, many dimensions. So let's not just focus on the women, much as you'd like to, Cyrus.
Coming back to that, now that you insist we don't, Oscar Wilde said divorces are made in heaven. And three, Kabir, I remember you making light of it once at a party. Exactly that, three divorces. That must have been heavy. Have you been open about all that and what one goes through?
Yeah, it's what I went through is certainly part of that. And again, I've not shied away from telling the truth of what caused those divorces. I've accepted my own frailties and guilts as well. I haven't tried to hide those as well. This is why a lot of people say to me, how could you be so frank? How could you be so honest? Because I've told people things that people normally hide. And this is one of the things I set out to do. So I let the chips fall where they may. That was my life. This is what I did. This is what they did. Let's tell it like it is. A life is interesting only if it has drama in it. If you just write an autobiography, which is a catalog of all your great achievements, all the wonderful things you did, all the wonderful awards you made, all the wonderful people you met, your eyes glaze over after some time. A real story has to have drama. It has to have, your hero down the ropes, even after great success. How do you rebuild from that? Those are the stories that enliven my book and that I've written about with all the truth I could summon. I must say, it wasn't easy because some of that involved revisiting some of my most painful moments, which I've also done as authentically, as deeply, as honestly as I could, sharing what that meant to me, including the death of my son, and what goes through the mind of a father as he's dealing with a situation where he's trying to prevent a tragedy with his son. It's a deeply poignant and moving chapter, and I've spoken of it again with the same honesty as I have with the whole book. So I think a lot of people will get a lot of things out of it. And the book is dedicated to the young people of today. It's dedicated to young professionals like my son Siddharth, who want to make the world a better place. Because it's important that this generation also knows, not just about me, but about the times I lived in. What was it like to live in the 60s and 70s in India? What was it like to live in the 80s and 90s in Hollywood? What were those times like? What were those people in places like? And yet do it throughout in a way that is linked to stories that hopefully keep you compelled to the thing. I've had to eliminate a number of other stories in my life that weren't central to the stories I was telling, because there's nothing boring than a story being told and people going down all the by lanes they encounter along the way. Stick to the highway. What is the story? What comes next? What needs to come next? That's what makes my book interesting, because I wrote it in that style. As an actor, having been in many films, I know. And even you, being in theater films, you can't let the air out of a scene. You have to keep it moving, dramatic, interesting, entertaining. And that's what I tried to do.
Well, lucky for you, Kabir, it's been like that in life art, same thing for you now. As you write the book, was it therapeutic, you think? As I listen to you, I'm just trying to understand. It seemed like it's both draining and therapeutic. So it's almost like cathartic in a sense, but, was it like
Yeah,
that? Was it like an
yeah.
experience on its own?
It was draining because I had to revisit parts of myself, parts of my life that I certainly hope to leave behind, parts of my life that were very painful to revisit. It was also cathartic because I was able to say a lot of things that I hadn't been able to say for many years. But it was also revelatory. I was able to look at myself with the wisdom of today and look at the younger Kabir and look at the things he did, the glories he had, but also the mistakes he made, and things that he maybe should have ended earlier or should have done differently at that time or should have not made that choice at the time. I could see, and I could see why I did it, but I was seeing it with today's eyes. So writing at this stage in my life has been very wonderful because I was able to give it a certain perspective and, and compassion even for my mistakes.
You know, there's one story you haven't put in the book, and that's a story many years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe 10, I don't know. We were on a boat going to somewhere in Hong Kong, going to
Macau, yeah.
Macau. We were going to Macau. That's
Yeah,
right.
right.
You do remember. And you were the only person I knew. This was a bank show or something, and so we hung out for a little while. And you said you wanted to have a cigarette, and you took me inside a small cabin where the smokers stood. Kabir, I nearly
Mhm.
died. It was like the worst 5 minutes of my life. There were 15 people trying to chug it down as quickly as they could in a small area.
I
I was
know,
just
I
thinking,
know.
yeah, I remember that
I mean,
vividly.
smoking is not good, but if people do smoke, they shouldn't be discriminated against so badly
Yeah,
because they have
I
rights
don't,
too.
I'm sick of it. I think, someone has to give the other side of the story. My own dad is not very well in the, he smoked all his life. And I really honestly believe that making him stop smoking has been the wrong decision. I really think his entire
Yeah,
psychological profile has changed. He's become a bitter, mean-spirited kind of person, and I don't know.
yeah.
It just doesn't add up. This one blanket ban, and again,
No,
growing up in the 80s and 90s, watching people like you and stuff, I don't know if it's the worst thing that was ever invented. I think this PC has just gone to another,
well,
level.
obviously, smoking is not advised, but those that smoke are exercising a valid right they have, and they are choosing ways that are satisfying to them, in the same way that people drink or people seek pleasures in other ways. This is one of the pleasures they have. I'm not advocating it. I don't think it's a good thing for health, but like I said, people have a right to choose their pleasures.
Well, the government should then just ban it completely. You go and sell it, then what are you supposed to do after that? The person should not be made to feel like a pariah. I mean, that's
Banning means they've tried banning alcohol, it doesn't work. You can't ban things that people want, and if you do, people will find ways of getting around it. We've seen that in all these states that have prohibition, all these places that claim to be
here
liquor
we ban
free.
the meats. It's a reverse ban. Anyway,
Yeah. So anyway, the point is, I am a smoker, but I don't advertise it and I don't glorify it.
yeah, well, I just believe, I don't know, I just think that we've reached a point where it's just gone completely, the PC has gone to the other extreme, where, they just,
It
I'm not
has,
saying you
absolutely.
glorify
You're right.
smoking,
You're
but they,
absolutely right,
but how,
Cyrus. Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
absolutely
imagine we
right.
don't
This
have
has
the picture of
become,
Humphrey Bogart with the thing in his hand, and, I mean, there's so many iconic things out there, which is just rubbishing completely, which as a young person gave you a lot of pleasure to watch and inspired you, I'm sure. But let's not
yeah, and
endorse it, otherwise they'll come
it's,
after us.
it's like in cinema, you can't show people smoking and all that. I mean, I find that ridiculous because people do
Ridiculous.
smoke, and filmmakers must have a right to show
You
reality
can show
or the
someone murdering.
huge disclaimers on the screen, which then ruin the scene for you. So yes, I
Yeah,
think in that respect, that political correctness has gone too far, and I completely agree with you.
murder is okay, pedophile giri is okay, all that is okay on the screen, and then suddenly the guy has a cigarette and they've got a disclaimer. It's ridiculous. God's sake. Just a couple of quick happy stories then, also from the book, because your life has been, as you said, it's just mirrored your theater, and it's just one drama after another, whether it's on stage, off stage, etc., in your private life or whatever. You met the Beatles, the greatest group that ever
Yeah,
lived, and
yeah.
for once you were, you were the guy looking at somebody with awe. So what was that like? And that too in India.
Um, at that stage, I was studying at St. Stephen's College, and it's a college I got into because I got the academic qualifications, but because of my parents' very idealistic lives, there was no money in the bank, so I had to find ways to pay for my college education, and working for All India Radio was one of them. And it so happened that the Beatles came into town, and I was the biggest Beatles fan in the world. And I said, I've got to get to them. So I persuaded my bosses to give me the All India Radio tape recorder and the badge. And they laughed at me, of course, how are you going to get past all the press? I went to the Oberoi Continental, I sat there, I stalked out Brian Epstein, their manager, and finally I got to him and I said, the government have insisted that they do an interview with the Beatles, etc. I basically put a fast on him
Wow.
and and managed to get this incredible interview. Actually, the story is far more interesting. I'm just cutting to the chase here of how I got to that interview, what happened in that interview, and even more importantly, what was the fallout and effect of that interview that changed my life that it forced me to leave Delhi and come to Bombay. So that was a pivotal moment in my life. And to be in the same room as the Beatles, man, this is the not just greatest musicians that ever lived, they were the epitome of the 60s and everything the 60s represented. And the whole counterculture movement, the miniskirts, the psychedelic shirts, the demonstrations of peace. The world was changing from the post-World War formalism of the older generation to a generation that was wandering around and think of a new society. The pill had been invented, new sexual freedoms were in the air. So it was a time of social turmoil, and we were part of that social turmoil in India and wanted to be part of that social turmoil that challenged the older systems, challenged the older values. So, for instance, when even Prathama and I met and we lived together, there were newspaper articles saying they lived together because it was scandalous at the time. Today, nobody cares. There
No,
were,
no. Today, if you live together, they're worried. Because what the hell are you doing still together? It's like that.
yeah, the relationships tend to be a bit more fluid in the age of Tinder.
Yeah. So yeah, wow. So you left Delhi because you were hounded because of the interview you had managed to
No,
usurp.
well, I don't want to give away all the crown jewels of my book, but basically, to cut to the chase, I gave it to All India Radio to broadcast, which they did. But when I went back to get the copy of the tape, they couldn't find it. So I raised hell and I said, where the hell is that tape? It turned out that they had taped another program over my interview with the Beatles. Because in those days, All India Radio and television was a skeleton service run with very little money, and they didn't have money for new tapes. So
Oh
these
my
poor fellows just
God.
thought, and they didn't realize what they got. But some poor staffer sitting in the back room of All India Radio doesn't know what the Beatles are, for God's sake. Or he didn't. And he thought, अच्छा, ये दूसरा पंडित जी का इंटरव्यू करना, चलो इसके ऊपर tape कर देते हैं. And the net result was my interview got taped over. And I was this was broadcasting gold. I could have sold it to any
This is a
network in the world.
this is a
And
crime,
they could have
Kabir.
played it forever. And I just
This is
came
a
to that point, and due to other reasons also, which I've stated, that I am not going to work with these people. I have to find a different destiny for myself. Then I went through the whole turmoil of deciding what were my choices in life. And I set out for Bombay with 700 rupees in my pocket to become a director. That was my ambition when I came to Bombay. And that's how it all began. So, without giving away all the great dramas that happened before, during, and after, this was the central decision that brought me to India's maximum city.
wow. So you go, people listening, go out and get the book, Stories I Must Tell, which will open up everything. We've just given you a
This
taste of
is the
it.
book.
That's Kabir. What is the look here? This is from which era? Sandokan, is it?
No. This is a picture taken just after the success of Sandokan. It was taken by a photographer called Terry O'Neill, who was the Annie Leibovitz of his age. And he photographed Elton John, British royalty, all the rock groups. He was the greatest star photographer in London. And I was photographed by him. And he took this incredible picture of me. And I've always kept it since then. In all my travels, in all the different homes I moved from continent to continent, this was always in my things that I carried because it was a picture. It was one of the best pictures taken of me. And it summed up that era. So when it came to time to pick the picture, my wife Parveen said to me, that's the one that's got to go on the cover. And I had another more contemporary picture in mind. I thought it would be better to have a contemporary, but she was right. This is the picture that has made all the difference. It sort of summed up a time and age, and here it is, Stories I Must Tell, and the emotional life of an actor. it really, it's, as you can see, it's behind me as well. I don't normally sit around in my office with huge posters of myself, but I'm in a book promotion
It's a
mode
bit
these
late for
days.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
book promotion mode these days. So forgive the ego
No, no,
having
I
my
think,
book
listen,
covers up.
I think it'll be a real treasure for people. And I'm telling you, if you're from the line, if you're an actor or somebody from the entertainment world, I think this book is a must. Because I think the empathy level and the identification of what you're talking about and what you're going through will be double. So
I
I
hope
really
so.
hope
I hope
people
so.
take to it.
That really is the intention. See,
But
Cyrus, the
did
thing
you
is,
realize you're such a. Sorry, go on.
no,
Sorry, go
the
on. Go on.
thing is, a lot of people listening to this program will learn things about my life, but they're not book buyers. Some people aren't book buyers. You can't persuade a non-book buyer to buy a book just because he's interested in you. Maybe if they pass through an airport and say, "Oh yes, Kabir's book," and buy it off the shelf. But the book buying, book reading people are a very special tribe. And those are the people I want to speak to, saying, "Hey guys, I think I got something interesting here for you, because it's not just my life, it's my heart. And it's a journey shared with you as intimately as I could." So I think there's a lot of entertainment here, experience for you. It's an emotional experience. And those are the people I want to touch and say, reach out. And hopefully convert a few non-book buyers as well into buying my book, because there's many ways of entertaining yourself, but there's nothing quite as immersive as a book when it comes to sharing
Well,
the mind and life and emotions of a person.
and Kabir, your critics may accuse you of many things, but no one can accuse you of not having a life that was full and is full in
Yeah,
that sense.
yeah.
So you might as well let us
Well,
into a few snippets into that life. But what a story it's been. I don't want you. I know you don't want to sound arrogant or something about it, but I mean, you're this guy from Delhi, with this almost mixed nationality background and this and that, and look at the end of the day, I mean, you've just not you've traversed everywhere, you've been everywhere through cultures, to different sort of platforms. You've embraced everything in a sense as an entertainer, and if I'm not mistaken, you've modeled it right at the beginning, so you actually started from
I
there
was,
and gone all
I
the way to
was,
Othello and beyond.
yeah, I was called India's first big male model. At the time when Shobha Day, who was then Shobha Rajadaksha, was
Yeah.
also on the scene, and Esther Daswani, she was also one of the supermodels. And and I used to be in advertising in those days. I used to make ad films. I worked for Lintas and Ogilvy and Mather, and I was their film chief. And I used to make lots of commercials, and I used them in my commercials as well. And then big companies used me in their. I launched the Will's Filter King brand in India with the risque slogan of "Start a long affair," which is what I did on a
Which could have been
couple of
your other book.
occasions.
This could have been the second book. Yeah.
Quite right, quite right.
Yeah. So this is a silly question, but before we take the break and bring in Silvery, did you ever, when you were contemplating or maybe having a drink, just being introspective, did you ever think as a younger Kabir that you would do all these things that you did, that you would be known across continents, that you would have a body of work over 5 or 6 decades? I mean, and that you would still be there.
Well, I certainly hoped that when I left the security of advertising and joined Bollywood, because I was doing very well in advertising, and all my contemporaries of that time, Suresh Malik and Ranjan Kapoor, and all these people became heads of agencies and very powerful people in advertising. So I did have a belief that I could make something of myself as an actor when I joined Bollywood. But then I realized early in my career that I didn't like being a singing, dancing star. And it was a real problem because, not that I don't like it, I love singing and dancing on the screen. I adore it. I think India does it better than anybody in the world. But I had 2 left feet, so I wasn't keen on singing and dancing. So I knew I had to look further afield. And then the Italians came, and that was the opportunity I recognized, took, and the rest, as they say, is history. Nobody can imagine that kind of success. One can hope for reasonable success, one can hope for reasonable recognition, but the kind of stardom I saw in Europe was extraordinary, and no Indian actor has ever done that before or after. And I thank the Lord for all the circumstances that helped me get that role. And there were a few interesting, let me just give you two quick
Please
things
do.
that helped me get that role. One is in my first hit film, Raj Khosla's Kache Dhage. I'd grown my beard. So every Indian producer that came to me afterwards said, please keep your beard. It is lucky. It is lucky. So my beard became my pehchan, my brand. Secondly, the play that I did called Tughlaq with Alec Padamsee began with me standing on stage with my back to the audience,
Back, yes,
arms
very famous.
outstretched, looking completely nude.
Yeah.
Of course, I was wearing a langote that covered the family jewels in front, but the
What was
audience
the need?
couldn't see.
The audience was at the back.
The audience from behind me saw a naked man on the stage and they gasped. So everyone was talking about my butt. So Italians, when they came to Bombay looking for a tall, athletic, bearded actor, were told, there's Kabir Bedi, because everyone knew me for my beard and people were talking about my butt. So this was one of the things that got me in a meeting with the Italians, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's one of the
The most
interesting tales of
artistic
my
people
book.
of Europe and recognize the importance of the derriere and the beard in art. All
Quite
right,
right.
fair enough.
Those are the little
Fabulous
factors that
story.
helped me get the role. Yeah.
It's too good to not be true. It has to be. All right, Kabir. So we're going to talk a little bit more now. We're bringing in young Silvery, who must be enraptured by the entire tale so far. Silvery, come in as we take a 2-second break, which is also over in the same sentence. And so in this bit now we'll do the AMAs, so people questions for Kabir and other things of importance, which Silvery handles. Silvery, what do you think of the voice of Kabir Bedi?
Yep. Yep.
That's your answer.
This
I'm asking you about his
amazing
voice.
voice. Sir, before that, I have a question. I think no, it's a captivating voice, very deep,
Thank
captivating
you.
voice. Of course. What else?
He's now overcompensating because he was
So
awkward for
I have a
Go
question.
ahead.
What was it like shooting for a James Bond movie back in the 80s, sir?
Oh, we didn't mention that. Yeah.
It was terrific.
So what was it like shooting a James Bond movie back in the 80s?
Yeah, he's answering it, Silvery.
It was absolutely fantastic to shoot a James Bond movie. I was the first Indian actor to act in a James Bond film. And apart from that, because you would then become of interest to Bond film fans all over the world. So suddenly your mailbox is full of people wanting your autographs, your photographs, know about you, inviting you to their conventions, inviting you to their events. But for me, the high point of the film was when they came to shoot Octopussy at the Lake Palace in Udaipur. And we were living in the Shivnivas, which overlooks the Lake Palace. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm an Indian actor playing a Punjabi Sikh, which is what I am, in a Bond film, shooting at the Lake Palace, living in the Shivnivas, looking down on this amazing scene. It's like having died and gone to heaven. It was just such a fulfilling moment to be there in the Bond film, shooting in India, and thinking, wow, what are the chances of that? And then, of course, it went on at that time to become very successful. And it is the most successful franchise in film history. And they spend no expense to get every film perfect in their films. And even the climax fight, which involved Roger Moore jumping onto the plane and me taking off, and him and I having a fight and me falling off the plane. That simple scene, what seemed like a simple scene, was actually shot on 3 continents with Roger Moore jumping on the plane in India, the backgrounds and plates from Europe, the fight shot in London, and the skydiver in America. They don't spare expenses. That's why Bollywood and Bond films always are so slick, and they have all this promise of guns, girls, gadgets, glamour. And I was part of it. It was thrilling.
Was it an Air India flight? Started in one continent.
No, it wasn't. It was far.
But if I remember correctly, Kabir was an out-and-out villain role, right? I think you kill a lot of people, and you're scowling.
Jordan and I were the 2 villains in the film, and I was the one who actually fought.
There was Vijay Amritraj as well.
He played a cameo. I was the one
dialogue.
I was the one that fought James Bond from beginning to end in the film.
Right.
Because I was also the physical heavy.
Yeah. Wow. Did you rough him up actually? I'm trying to remember the fight sequence.
No, there's fight sequences on trains, on planes, etc. Chases in the streets of Udaipur, that auto rickshaw flying through the air and everything else. But actors are trained not to rough each other up in real life, while seeming to rough each other really badly on screen. That's part of the art and craft of.
Was he a nice guy to work with, Roger Moore?
Very reserved to start with, but then as we started shooting and we shot the train sequences in Peterborough in the north of England, and we spent time together at the Lake Palace, he got to know me. He became very warm. In fact, there's a lovely incident which I'll end this question. While I was shooting Octopussy, my ex-wife Pratima came to visit, and we were sitting around dinner with Roger Moore and his Italian wife, and me and Pratima. And Pratima and I were laughing and chatting, etc. And his wife says to Pratima, "You two are laughing all the time. Why you not get married again?" And Pratima said, No. When we get married, the laughter stops. So she said, "In that case, I never let Roger visit his ex-wife again." And Roger just rolled his eyes to the skies.
Yeah. What
That's
fun.
in my
Sylvie,
book
look at
too.
what an interesting life, and what have we done? I'm already 49. I got no story to tell. My book is like 3 pages. I'll have to borrow from yours, Kabir, because
Cyrus,
you've not used so much material. You've got so much material you haven't
Cyrus,
used. Give it to
you've
us.
done a lot of things, man. You've done a lot of things, and you keep doing them. And you've been doing them since you were a child. You've been in films, you've been in television, you've been in radio, you've been in MTV. What haven't you done? And you've set records of your own. And I'm really
Roger Moore's
proud of what
wife.
you did. I salute what you did.
Oh my God. Okay. You're scaring me now, Kabir.
No,
Okay.
I'm just killing you with kindness. That's all.
Yeah. You know what I'm not used to. Sylvie, next question. Save the day.
Okay, sure. The next one comes in from Drishti Kapadia. She says, "Hi, Cyrus and guest. Big fan of the show. I love it when you have actors who you've known before on the show." She says, "My question is for you and the guest. Who is/was the one actor or director who you wish you can or could have worked with?"
Hey, Kabir, this is a big question for you.
I'm not answering that. I don't like lists. I don't have favorites.
Let's go international to be, let's leave the Indian community alone. Is there someone even if he's not alive, for example, did you ever think maybe Montgomery Clift? I wish I was in a scene with him. I mean,
No, there's all kinds of people one wishes that one had acted. I wish I'd acted with Sean Connery in a film. I would love to. I met him. I had a wonderful conversation with him, which is in my book. But I wish I'd done, because I respected him enormously as an actor, not just for playing James Bond. And
did you tell Roger Moore that?
No, actually, I met Sean after I met Roger Moore. But Sean was wonderful to meet. He was just one of those charismatic people that was actually better off screen than he was on screen, if you can believe that. He was really charismatic. So there's lots of people like that. And there's lots of roles I'd like to have done, lots of directors I'd love to work with. I can't get into the one that I would do it. I can't, because we all know who the big directors and names are, and who wouldn't want to work with any of them.
Sylvie, Kabir, I mean, look at the body of work across the world, so many famous names, and on top of that, he interviewed the Beatles as a teenager. I mean, who does that? And then, of course, our bureaucracy has to go and record over the tape. Again, the story has to be true. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's sort of cool. Across the world at that time, the Beatles interview Indian guy, this, that, boom, gone. And they've got some Hindustani classical singer on top of it. But oh God, that would be really something.
And in those days, actually, Doordarshan would only play Indian classical music. It was the only radio station in town, in the country. And Radio Ceylon stole a march over Doordarshan because they had the Binaka Geet Mala hosted by
Hit Parade.
That became the biggest hit across India. The whole of India was basically Radio Ceylon, not to All India Radio, because All India Radio didn't play Bollywood pop songs. There was this policy started by a minister called B.V. Keskar that All India Radio must just reflect Indian culture. And so they were just there was only half an hour of Western pop music on All India Radio those days, hosted by a legendary host called Pravindra Premchand, who set the standard for many following people in the radio. So there was very little of other than Indian classical music and talk about things, very serious things and issues of national import.
Well, those dark days may be around the corner. Don't worry. They may be reintroduced.
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm an
So am
optimist.
I.
I
I'm just
always
kidding.
believe the best is yet to come, even in my life.
Yeah.
And I hope in yours.
You never know. Silvery?
Yep. All right.
Sylvia, I just wanna warn you, I have another
Yeah. When
video
you need to
conference
leave, tell us.
at 2.
So 2 minutes. We'll leave in 2 minutes.
yeah.
We'll let you go.
Yeah, I just
Yo, Kabir Bedi, you have to tell us. I have to go. You don't have to.
no.
No
I
worries.
hate to do this, but I'm
Yeah.
loving
So
the
take one last
conversation,
question, Silvery.
but Sure.
Sure. The next one comes in from Gayatri Dave. She says, "Hi, Cyrus and guest. Huge fan of the show. Writing in for the first time." She says, "What has been the biggest/best moment in your life? A moment that you like to reminisce about? Was it something someone said to you, or maybe some big event that changed your life's direction? Perhaps. Love listening to the show. Please keep it up."
It's a tough one for Kabir. I suppose. Would there be a moment coming to Bombay, deciding to take up films, Sandokan, the change?
There are so many moments that are really unforgettable, all chronicled in my book, I must add. But that moment when I was in Italy with Parveen Babi after the success of Sandokan, and we were living at the Excelsior Hotel in Via Veneto. And when we looked across the road, across this news kiosk, and we saw that every magazine in that news kiosk had either my picture or Sandokan or me and Parveen on the cover. And I realized the boy from Delhi had come a long, long way. It's a moment of great fulfillment. I had tears in my eyes, and Parveen's eyes shone with happiness. It was one of those great moments of feeling, boy, I've arrived. And that was actually only the beginning of my even more tumultuous journey in the decades ahead. So to answer your question, that was certainly a moment I remember with great joy and pride. And there are others and many others, and I don't want to give away the crown jewels of my book. So if you're really interested, check it out.
Well, I'll say one thing as we end here. Please check out the book. But what a life it's been, really, Kabir. I think one book won't do justice. You may have to do a whole web series for us. What an interesting life, really. From small
Thanks,
anecdotes to people you've met to the body of work you've done. And I still believe India has not recognized you enough. And I will repair that once I come to pass. Silvery, our party is called Kabir. Our party is called BJP. It's a Broacha Janta Party. It's an offshoot.
Yeah.
So there,
Right.
alcohol allowed. Meat's not a question. We work only till 2 in the afternoon. After that, you're free to go.
Right.
Yeah. So keep us in mind when you vote. Yeah.
I will certainly keep you in mind.
All right.
And,
I know you have to go. Yeah.
But I'm sorry I have to go. But Cyrus, I just want to say what a lovely chat it's been. You've always been a very warm and supportive friend, and I've always admired what you do. So let's just call this the continuation of a wonderful bromance between us.
The start of a beautiful friendship. Then we have to be allowed to smoke, for God's sake.
Why not? I agree with you on that too.
Okay. Just kidding. Before they start.
Allowed,
attacking us.
yes.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Fair enough. Okay, Kabir, cheers. Keep the flag flying, and we'll hear more from you, I'm sure, very soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Cyrus. Thank you, Silvery.
Our pleasure. Our
Also known
pleasure.
as Antriksh.
There you go.
Great being on the show. And keep rocking, guys. Keep rocking. Bye.
Bye-bye.